I tell you the truth. The man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. The word of the Lord.
All right. Well, good morning again. For those of you who have not met me, my name is Brian Newby. I'm the pastor here at Trinity Baptist Church, and coming up on month 3. So my family has been here just a short amount of time. We've been learning more and more about the city. This past week, we found ourselves in Dumbo and walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, which by walking across, what I actually mean was being carried unwillingly by a crowd, that's just kind of slowly pushing you forward, trying not to get hit by a bicyclist. A lot of people were out this weekend. It was great. It was kind of nice weather, a little bit overcast, not too hot. Really nice to kind of go out on this walk. We made our way over the bridge, and when you get there, what you're supposed to do is reward yourself for all that exercise by eating lots of pizza. So we went down from the bridge, and you've got 2 options, okay? There is Grimaldi's, which is quite famous, of course. It's actually a national chain at this point. Fun fact, my family decided to accept the position here as lead pastor at Trinity Baptist Church while at Grimaldi's in Dallas, okay? So it truly is, we thought it was appropriate, okay? It truly is just kind of everywhere. But you have another option that's right next to it. Does anyone know what it is? There, ice cream. Okay, pizza option, another pizza option, Giuliana's. Okay, now, a little history about this. Right, Grimaldi, Patsy Grimaldi, the gentleman who started Grimaldi's Pizza, one of the most famous pizza proprietors of the city, right? It's become quite a big thing. He actually sold it over 2 decades ago. It still bears his name. Kind of went into retirement and has just been living the retired life. In 2012, he decided he missed it so much that he unretired and actually cut a deal to go back into his original pizza space, right, with the coal oven and all of that, that's actually right next to Grimaldi's. So Mr. Grimaldi, who started Grimaldi's, but can't call it that now, obviously, because he sold it, created it and called it after, I believe, his grandmother, Juliana. So anyway, it's amazing. You get there, and just the lines, for both of these things are outrageous. And it was so interesting to watch, right? There's these people who are lining up for this pizza because they found it online or something about this, read the reviews, and they're just expecting the most amazing pizza that, you could ever have. And it was fantastic pizza. But people are in line, and then all of a sudden when they queue up, they get online, as we say here in New York. They get online, and all of a sudden, they're there for about 10 minutes. Nothing's moving. Not a single person is going in. 15 minutes, you start seeing the people who get a little antsy, right? And they decide this, well, I'm going to ask. Just hold my spot, and they go and they ask, about how long is the wait? An hour plus. Standing in this line outside for a slice of pizza. Now, you get 2 types of people in that moment, right? You get the people who believe very much in the concept of delayed gratification, okay? Like, I believe it's going to be worth it. And so I'm going to spend an hour of my time while on vacation. I could be seeing the rest of Dumbo, checking out the pier, all this. I'm going to wait in line because you know what? I believe it's worth it. And then you've got another group of people, right? Maybe they don't care about pizza that much, but whatever it is, after about 15 minutes, they just bail and say, you know what? It's not worth it. There was this little restaurant right next door to Juliana's. I think it was like Mediterranean or something. It literally was filled with people who just bailed on Juliana's. I think that was their entire business model. Like, who's the impatient people that we can kind of just, tap into? I tell you, no one believes in delayed gratification like tourists, right? So many of these famous places you go all throughout the city, it's lines. It's waiting. for your turn to do whatever this amazing thing is. Do you know that this is actually not just something with tourists in here? It's actually a cultural phenomenon, and a lot of it will determine your success in life. So there was in 1972, Stanford did a really interesting experiment, and they called it the marshmallow experiment. Anyone familiar with the marshmallow experiment? Okay, so what they did was, this is 1972, they would bring a child in a room, they would sit down at a table with them, and they would set a marshmallow right in front of them. And they said, so here's the deal, I'm gonna go and I'll be gone for just a little bit, but if I come back and that marshmallow is still there, i.e. you haven't just gobbled it and consumed it right away, I'm actually gonna give you a second marshmallow. But if you eat it before I get back and it's not here, that's the only marshmallow you get. So, and then they have cameras, of course. And it's amazing what children would do, right? The whole time they're there, and some of them are like fidgeting. Other ones are shielding their eyes from the temptation of the marshmallow because it is so just, oh my gosh, you have to get it. And so they would do this study, and then they would track the children who couldn't do delayed gratification, right? They didn't have that ability to go, it's worth it, and I'm going to wait. It's worth it. That those students, they tracked them over the next 40 years. And in general, they said those who exhibited more self-control and were able to wait, believing it was worth it, actually had higher SAT scores. They were more socially adapted, as informed by their parents, reported by their parents. They had lower obesity measurements, better coping mechanisms, less drug addictions, just in general. They did better in life compared to the group that had kind of a low impulse control. Now, we're going to come back to that study here at the end of this message. But what this really comes down to, whether you're talking about pizza, whether you're talking about just success in general in life, almost all of us have to come to a place in our lives where we ask and answer the question, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Because there's few things in life that are actually just going to be so easy that whether you think about it or not, the crowd, like the Brooklyn Bridge, is just going to sweep you towards the destination that you want to go, right? For the most part, there's challenge. It's difficult. And we have to answer the question, is it worth it? Now, let's talk about the book of John for a second. Jesus is challenging his disciples, those who are following after Jesus. It has been getting harder and harder and harder. Each step that they take, each step that Jesus takes, is heading towards the cross. We're about to get soon to the resurrection of Lazarus, and that's when the story really pivots and turns, where now the authorities are actively trying to kill Jesus, and the disciples are continually faced with this question, is it worth it? And their answer to that is going to determine a lot about their reality. The same is true today. See, here's the problem. Is it worth it to follow Jesus? Here's what we need to fight. Well, which Jesus? Because the reality of it is, we have so many different cultural pictures of Jesus in our minds, and a lot of them aren't worth following. Let me say that again. There's a lot of different just ideas. Who is this Jesus? What's the picture in our minds? And a lot of those images fall short. And if that's your image of Jesus, it's probably not worth it. Let me list just a couple. Okay, when you just ask out on the street, like, describe Jesus to me. If you could just see if Jesus was here and you were going to describe him, what would you describe him as? You get some different descriptions, right? One of them is cold Jesus. Right? He's the removed Jesus who's kind of standing there. He did something good for you, and really, this is what you've done with your life. Like, how depressing. You should be doing so much more. I'm really kind of upset with you. I'm stern. I'm aloof. Right? That's one of them. Right? A second image of Jesus, a picture of Jesus that we often have, is killjoy Jesus. Like, this is the Jesus who's primarily about the word no. Okay, is it fun? Jesus is probably saying no to that. Do you enjoy it? He's probably looking down on you for it. We have this, here's an idea of Jesus that honestly, he's kind of a killjoy. Now, on the other side of it, you've got what I'll call pushover Jesus, right? Like he's super kind, he always, his hands are always like this, and he's got this, beatific look on his face. And you do things that are wrong, but he's kind of, like a nice grandpa with a Werther's Original in his pocket, just ready to give it to you, and he kind of is like, come on, guys, you need to stop that. But really, he's, he's just kind of a pushover. I want to tell you, what you believe about Jesus will greatly impact your reality today. Because all of us have to answer the question, is it worth it? Is it worth it to follow Jesus? Is it worth it to keep going when it's actually tough, when it's actually hard? Do I believe that there's something that is actually worth it about this? And if your picture is anything less than the biblical Jesus, your answer is probably no. And so today I want us to explore, what does Jesus say about himself? What is the picture that Jesus wants to paint so that you will have a greater understanding, a deeper reality to who is this Jesus? And is it worth it to follow him? Turn with me this morning to John chapter 10. John chapter 10. We are making our way through the book of John. We're covering most chapters. We won't be able to get to everyone because of time. But here we're going to be marching through as we go through the stories of Jesus. And this week brings us to Jesus giving an illustration, word pictures about who he is. Now, this a lot of times we'll call is the Good Shepherd passage. Actually, Jesus says he's a whole lot of things in this text. Good Shepherd is just one of them. But we're going to kind of dig into that and see what are these images that Jesus wants to give, not necessarily what we might believe about killjoy Jesus or pushover Jesus. John chapter 10, verse 1. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the doors, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they'll not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. Now, verse 6, this figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. Who's the they? Who is Jesus talking to? Well, his disciples are there for one. You have probably some just onlookers, listeners. But you have the religious leadership who's here. And Jesus decides to launch into this discussion and compare himself to a shepherd. Now, that's a little bit tough for us today because unless you live in the UK or New Zealand, probably you're not super involved with caring for sheep. You don't see sheep that often. You don't really know people who are necessarily caring for sheep. But back then, it actually was just an incredibly common profession that was a part of just the local economics and the food structures that they had. And so Jesus gives this analogy, this figure of speech that people would have really understood well. We have to do a bit more work to kind of see what he's saying. But the first thing that he says is that anyone who comes into the sheep pen by any other way than through the gatekeeper is probably up to no good, okay? It's like the person who's getting into the back of the restaurant by climbing over the fence. Chances are they're not there for good purposes, right? That's pretty obvious to us. But Jesus says, you know what? The gate opens up to me, and I call my sheep, who are his sheep, those Israelites who God has chosen and who have believed in God, right? He will call his sheep. Now, what's the deal with this whole calling thing? So traditionally, in the ancient Near East, a lot of times when they would actually pen up sheep, they would have one larger pen, and they would have multiple flocks within the same pen. This made sense. It was kind of for, it was economically more efficient. You could have a couple of guards that would protect a lot of flocks. You don't have to spend as much material on the fences. So there's a lot of pragmatic reasons. But there was a lot of flocks all in one space, And Jesus gives this picture. He says, I'm a shepherd, and the gatekeeper opens to me because I'm legitimate. I'm actually the shepherd of a certain flock, and I come in and I call with my voice. And the sheep who are there hear my voice and they respond. Did you know that's actually how sheep work? Crazy, right? That if there's somebody who has spent time with them, somebody who raised the sheep from when they were just a little lamb, and had worked with them, that the sheep would actually become very aware of the voice. And so when someone would get up and they would call, any who are the sheep of that particular flock will respond and come after. But for those who have a different shepherd, maybe a different, hireling, they just totally ignore it, right? It's just another noise. And so Jesus is giving this illustration, one that would have just clicked with them and said, hey, it's kind of like when I walk in, and those who are my sheep, I call, and they recognize, oh, that is the voice of my shepherd. And so they follow after Jesus. Now, I want to point out something really fascinating here. Right? He says this in verse 3, the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. Now, in this big pen, right, here comes the shepherd, the one who legitimately is there for the sheep, and he calls them, and they all start to follow. But there's two things about Jesus, two things I want to inform our picture about Jesus today that I don't want you to miss. Okay, the first is that Jesus cares enough to know you. Jesus actually cares enough to know you, and I mean not you as the collective you all, okay, or y'all, former Southerners here, right? He actually knows you. Think about this, right? As a shepherd, he comes in and he does whatever call he does. I'm not going to do it, it'd be terrible. He does whatever call he does, right? And the sheep start to follow. That makes sense. But does the shepherd actually need to know the name of every single sheep in his flock? No, not at all. I mean, maybe that's like the one with the brown spot, or that's the one who keeps wandering off. Like you might need to know that, but it's not like you have to go and give a specific name to every sheep. I mean, some of these flocks could be hundreds of sheep. And you're going to take the time to actually be able to distinguish every one, to give them a specific name. And it's almost like as they're passing through, Jesus says, here is your name. That's totally above and beyond what a shepherd would have done, right? And so Jesus is saying, hey, not only am I the one who comes in and calls, but I actually care to know that you're not just a face in the crowd. That's not just this God who's really up there and he's cold and he's distant and he goes, you people, go and do good things, He actually knows your name. God actually cares enough to know you specifically as a person and to give you a name well above and beyond what any shepherd would have done. Look at the next thing it says, not only that he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out, that he actually is the one who leads them. So most of the time here in the West, when we think about sheep or pastoral work, those who work with sheep or goats, right, most of the time we think of, Scotland, New Zealand. Is Jason here this morning? Right? I read the stat that there's actually more sheep in New Zealand than people. Amazing, right? Scotland, they determine whether something's an island or a rock based on how many sheep it can support naturally, right? There's parts of the world that are very much driven by sheep and the economy that generates. But most of the time in Western view, you know what it is? It's driving sheep, right? You've got sheepdogs, if you want to think of it in a Western sense, a cattle drive. The concept for shepherding in modern day, and particularly in the West, is you drive the sheep, right? The dogs are kind of pushing you forward, and the shepherd just kind of comes in the back to clean up and pick up anybody who's kind of fallen out of the group. But that's not what Jesus says he does, right? It does not say that Jesus drives the flock. What does it say? That he leads them. This is a very different mindset, right? It's not this, okay, everybody, get going. Hey, you, brown spot one. No, sir. No, you get back in line here. That's not what's happening. Jesus actually is leading the way. Jesus is asking the sheep to follow. He's not driving them. He's not cracking a whip. He's not yelling, "Get back in line." Jesus is actually leading. I tell you, there's so many people who sit there and go, when I think of Jesus, right, I think of this cold, stern figure who's just, arms folded, breathing out loudly to signal his disappointment. You know what the text says? Far from this image of a cold Jesus, that there's actually this caring Jesus who takes the time to actually know you personally. You matter. You matter. Not just the group, you specifically matter. And that Jesus isn't cracking this whip. He's not yelling, "Get back in line." Jesus is actually asking you to follow him. And you know what? In some of the hard places in life that we go, some of the hard places that Jesus calls you to, you can take an incredible amount of comfort in the fact that Jesus will never ask you to go where he's not already waiting. Because he's not cold. Jesus cares. He actually leads you. And any of that hard place that you're going, Jesus is actually steps ahead of you, saying, "Follow me." It's totally different than what we would expect. Look at what he says in this next section, verse 7. So Jesus said again to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep." Okay, so he was a shepherd. Now he's the door. "All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I come that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is hired hand is not a shepherd who does not own the sheep. When he sees wolves coming, he leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep." So Jesus is going to pivot here. That was one story of it. Now he's going to give a bit of a different illustration around the same concept, right? Not just I'm a shepherd who comes in and I call, I know, I care, I lead. He's now actually the gate. And we're going to remove the gatekeeper right now. And he says, "I'm actually the gate, and all who come before me are thieves and robbers." And what is the goal of the thief? What does it say? The thief comes to. Now think about this, for example. What of that list makes sense? The thief comes to three things. What makes sense? Steal. All right. Killing and destroying doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? I mean, just think about this. If you're there for sheep, you want to grab a couple. I don't know how you take sheep. You grab a couple, you climb back over the wall. This is not how it happens. I'm confident, but I don't really know. So, whatever you're doing, you're taking these sheep away. Are you just walking in and slaughtering them and running off? What's the point? Right? And there's something more going on here than just somebody who's stealing. So Jesus, we'll come back to that. Jesus says this, "Hey, I'm the gate, and any of those who are coming to harm the flock, I'm actually defending. I'm actually keeping them out." But you know what? For those sheep who want to enter in, when they do, the door opens to them, and they find eternal life. So Jesus actually defends, right? Jesus actually protects those sheep who come to him. Right? He's not this person who just goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you got dragged off by the wolf. I wasn't really looking. I was checking Instagram. I got a notification. I'm so sorry." No, Jesus presents a very strong image. I'm the gate. And you know what? If you're a thief, if you're a robber, if you're here to do harm, guess what? I'm going to stop you. I'm here to protect. Jesus defends. But not only that, Jesus paints a very different image as the good shepherd, as the gate, versus the thief. The thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy, right? This is Satan and his purposes for your life, right? Whatever shiny bauble is in front of you, you can guarantee you that its ultimate intention is to steal, kill, and destroy. It's not just, "I'm taking you for my own good." My intention is destruction. That is Satan's intention for you. As good as whatever he's offering may look, you can always be sure that his intention underneath that is always to steal, kill, and destroy. But that's not what Jesus is. Jesus says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Now think about this for a moment. Jesus' intention, separate from the thief, is that you would have life. And that you're actually going to have it in this way that's it's almost overflowing. It's spilling out. There's more life, there's more good than you can even handle. And it's just coming out of you. Now think about that when we talk about this, right? We talked about cold Jesus. What about killjoy Jesus? Right? Jesus is there to say no. Whatever it is, if you like it, probably Jesus is going, shouldn't be doing that, you know? Is that your image of Jesus? Because I want you to know, right, sometimes on the surface of it, you can look at it and go, wow, this example, Satan, right? What he puts in front of us just looks so good, but the intention is always destruction. It will always, always, always lead to your destruction. Every time, no exception. And when Jesus comes to us, even if there is, hey, this is the way that I want you to live, the intention, the goal, the outcome is always life. Jesus isn't some galactic killjoy trying to make your life boring, okay? Jesus actually has good things for your life, and he knows the ways that those lead to it. Because if what you imagine in your mind is this killjoy Jesus, when it comes time to answer the question, is he worth following? You're probably going to say no. Who is Jesus? Let's look at this last section as we close. Verse 14. I am the good shepherd. I know my own and my own know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay my life down for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not in this fold. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice, so that there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay my life down that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me. Look at that again. No one takes it from me. But I lay it down on my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to lay it up. This charge I received from the Father. So Jesus is the shepherd, right? He's caring. Jesus is the gate. He not only defends, but Jesus has good things for your life. Jesus intends good for you. And now we come to this. Jesus is the good shepherd, not just a shepherd. He's now the good shepherd. What makes him good? What makes him better than just the regular shepherd, the hireling who comes in and goes, oh, wow, this is a bit more of a cost than I'm willing to pay. I'm out of here. He's the good shepherd because he's willing to lay down his life for the sheep. Now, again, Jesus takes a common illustration, what people would have naturally understood, and then he blows the top off of it. Right? People would have understood, hey, if there's danger, I'm going to defend the sheep. Okay, I mean, that's laudable. It's a good thing, but that's your job. I mean, you're the shepherd. That's your job. If there's a wolf, throw some rocks, shoot it with a bow and arrow, whatever you're doing. Like, you're supposed to defend the sheep. But Jesus actually takes it a totally different step further. He goes, it's not just that I'm willing to fight and defend the sheep. I am going to die for the sheep. Tell you what, that must have been baffling to those who were listening. Because here's the deal, right? If you're a shop owner, let's say you own a shop here in New York, right? You're going to probably defend your stuff if someone wants to rob it. But are you going to say, I will die for these concessions, Probably that's not the best trade, the benefit of keeping the concessions is not going to be used by you, okay? Jesus says, hey, it's not just that I'm going to defend. It's not just that I care, that I call, that I lead, that I guide. I am actually going to lay down my life. Now, please listen. I did not say he's going to have his life taken from him. Jesus is incredibly clear, making a very strong statement. I will choose to lay down my life. No one will take it from me. Church, Jesus did not find himself in a sticky situation that went south fast, okay? It's not like all of a sudden he was going along in Jerusalem and they were going to go crucify him, and so God went, well, I guess we'll go with this, That's not how it happened, right? It was intentional. Now think about this. Most people, when they think about a pushover Jesus, they think about this weak person, this weak character who they think really, is just there to kind of wink at the problem and say boys will be boys, right? This pushover Jesus. Now, Jesus presents this really strong image that says, no, I am going to lay down my life for the sheep, and guess what? I'm going to take it back up again. For some of you here, you almost have this sense that Jesus is resentful of you and his sacrifice that he had to make for you. You ever felt that way? Right, God is going, I can't believe I gave up my life for this joker. Are you kidding me? You did that again? What, my sacrifice didn't matter enough to you? Right? And Jesus is kind of this resentful figure who just, it happened to do it, and he didn't really want to, and you know what? You're not really panning out to be that worth it anyway. Let me tell you, that's not a Jesus worth following. Scripture's very clear. Jesus said, I laid down my life. I chose this. It was my choice, not yours. I'm not resentful about your actions. I'm not a pushover to whatever it was that you're doing. I chose because I have the authority. It's this very strong Jesus who says, you know what? I intentionally laid down my life, not had it taken from me, for you. Why? Because he loves you. Not because you're lovable. Sheep are actually pretty stupid animals. I don't want to say that too loud, right? They really are. I mean, they will die on their own. They're some of the most shockingly domesticated animals available, right? Right? It's not a flattering image to the people around us. It's not going, well, sheep are just so incredibly wonderful. I should lay down my life for them. Jesus chose that because he loves you. As the worship team comes up, you know that marshmallow study? When we talk about this in this marshmallow study and we ask this question, is it worth it? Do you know after 40 years of that Stanford experiment in 1972 that they tracked these individuals and what they were doing, how successful they were in life? Do you know they actually redid that study in Rochester in 2012? And they found out something fascinating. They did the study again, but this time they changed it a little bit. They said, before we get to the marshmallow stage, what we're going to do is we're going to give you some experiences. Some where adults and caregivers are reliable, and some where they're unreliable. So they would walk in and say, hey, you know what, here's some crowns. Actually, I'm going to come back with some more crowns for you in just a minute. I'll be back. And they go, and they come back with nothing. They say, oh, here's some snacks. Oh, actually, that was just a little bit. I'm going to go get you some more snacks. I'll be back. And they come back with nothing. The other group, they come back with crowns. They come back with snacks. And then they did the marshmallow test. Do you know what they discovered? That the kids who could trust the caregivers to follow through on their word were the kids who could actually have the patience to believe it's worth it. And the kids who'd experienced this unreliable setting, see, kids aren't born with this intense ability to somehow have self-discipline, right? They learn what can you trust. You know the crazy thing about that is your ability to follow after Jesus when it's hard is going to be so tied to who you believe Jesus is. And is he actually good? Is he actually trustworthy? And if you've got these images in your mind of this cold Jesus, you got images in your mind of this killjoy Jesus, or this kind of pushover Jesus, I'm telling you right now, when that marshmallow is right in front of you, you're going to be gobbling it up. Because you don't really believe that he's there for your good. Today when we come and say, Jesus is the good shepherd, it can help us have confidence in his care. And as we believe in that, it changes your life today, a life that you can have to the full this morning. Let's worship together as we come to communion, believing that the sacrifice of Christ is so, so worth it. That believing in what he has done will change our lives today. We invite you to come on up to the stations up here in the front, or to two in the back. If you've put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, we invite you to join us, whether you're a member here or not, and we'll be coming in groups of 4 to 5 to take it during this time as we sing and come before the one who is worthy. Join with us this morning for communion.